everyone, and Phil tells me we are on time, so I have a couple of hours for this. Is that correct? Okay, thank you very much. My name is Garcia. I'm the chairman and CEO of InterFlight Global Corporation. We are a boutique advisor and consulting firm in the aerospace industry. We are about 20 years in business, and for the last 10 we have been heavily advising investors in the aerospace industry, including the air transportation industry, the airline industry, and the commercial jet industry that we have been reviewing. For the first 10 years, that's pretty much what we did. The last 10 years, we got a wake-up call after 9/11 from our investors, where basically they told us, well, look, we want to understand the industry. We want to understand the air transportation industry within the layers that is. So basically, we expanded the range of our firm, and shortly we learned, very quickly we learned that to understand and invest intelligently in the aerospace industry, you certainly have to understand the infrastructure that lives and operates around aircraft, airports, and the most visible segment, which is the airlines, especially the scale airlines. What I'd like to do in 10-15 minutes is give you some insight into what, from the investor's viewpoint, some of you are investors, some of you are looking for investment, but from the investor viewpoint, I'd like to give you some hints of what the investors are looking for in our industry. And at the end, I'll give you 2 or 3 ideas of what areas of investment are interesting, what trends are we looking for, and I'll leave you with some insights. But I'd like to start with, you'll get the presentation, but I'd like to share with you a couple of thoughts. I just got back from Washington, D.C. last Friday of meetings with the FAA and the DOT advisory committee I serve in, and I went there looking forward to talking about infrastructure, about next-gen air traffic control, about airports, and I spent 3 days talking about railroads, trains, ships, and all sorts of multimodal forms of transportation that the FAA considers that are the kind of the weak link or the weak spot that is holding the air transportation industry, commercial air transportation industry, from being all it can be. So for 3 days, enormous. We talk about absolutely everything else, and also when we talk about next gen, we talked about space. Everybody talks about infrastructure and what supports the industry, and focus immediately on fuel. The cost of fuel, 20% of the airline cost, pricing, volatility, and so forth, and that's true. That's a big driver. The next big driver is, without a doubt, guidance, navigation. How the airplanes fly, where they fly, and how they fly affects directly the fuel consumption. So that weak link is being addressed by next gen. Next speaker is a next gen expert. But when you look at next gen, and you look at any infrastructure that has to do with aircraft guidance or navigation, one word immediately comes up is, where does that guidance come from? And the answer is from satellites. And where do satellites live? In space. So suddenly the FAA and all the other entities around the world are talking about airplanes. They're talking about ships, railroads, cars, and satellites. So the airplanes are a link in between that lives around this type of multimodal ways of transportation or of flight that are not so obvious to the investor. However, the clever investors that come into our industry want to know where does the industry fit in. So when we talk about flight operations, and we talk about it in length today, aircraft engines, airlines, the source, the seas, banks, I won't touch that. I won't go into that level of detail or expertise that was shown today. So what I'd like to discuss with you, and I welcome comments or questions from the panel or the audience, regarding what is aviation infrastructure. What are we talking about? And the most logical answer is airports. However, I'd like to invite you to think, and I brought some examples about what else is the infrastructure. Airports, what else? For instance, is an A380 correctly priced? I was talking about some of my investors, why are planes so expensive? They're showing me with facts that 10 years ago a 737 was $250,000 per seat to buy. And today, 737 NG is $300,000 per seat to buy. So where are the inefficiencies going? And the answer is infrastructure. Is the A380 properly priced? Has anybody seen how an A380 is built? Sent on a barge to a truck, to another barge, to another truck, then it arrives somewhere and it gets put together. So, is the infrastructure necessary to optimize the manufacture of an A380 there, or is it not? Is $300 million the right price, or is it not? So when one thinks about infrastructure, what I'd like to bring to the audience is what do we mean by that? And it's much more than just a place to take off and land, or even as important as it is, a satellite giving us guidance. Before the Boeing director that was here clearly said to lower cost of aircraft, we will reduce the R&D costs of making aircraft. So when we talk about infrastructure, we can also think about academia, university, science. Any other ideas? What is infrastructure? What infrastructure affects the value of an investment in aerospace? Okay, well, let me give you a few ideas. Let's put in perspective the air transportation and commerce chain. If we look at the global world economic activity, about $50 trillion, 50 European billions. If one looks at the aerospace industry, the total aggregate give or take is about $3 trillion. So we are talking about 6% of the world related economy. Half of that is defense. So and half of that is air transportation and all the commercial segments of the commerce chain. What we spoke about here all day was this segment of the air transportation industry, which makes about $750 billion of economic activity. And then when you come into general aviation, you have to about $500 billion, half a trillion. And these segments, this one is large growth and in emerging markets. But in mature markets such as North America, Western Europe, is certainly a low growth industry. When you go into government, non-military activities, you see some moderate growth. What do we mean by government? Well, the United Nations is one of the largest donors in the world. In case it's not so obvious, but there it is. So all the non-usual suspects fall here in a $0.2 trillion industry. And last but not least, we have an industry that is certainly part of the investment ecosystem of the aerospace industry, which is the space industry. Back to the concept of what is the space industry? Well, it's as important as the runways that the aircraft land in, but it's not so obvious. However, from an investor point of view, might be a good investment opportunity. Is it wise to invest in a satellite company, publicly traded? Is it wise to invest in a launcher of satellites somewhere in Europe or in North America? Maybe. But certainly to understand where the investment in a jet aircraft carrying passengers scheduled in North America, you really want to understand what is around that investment. You have to go a few layers up. I'll show you a couple of trends that we've seen in our research, our analysis, and our real-life investments through ourselves or through our clients. And I gave it, this is a global outlook with an America's flavor. But one trend that is very, very clear is that the infrastructure around air transportation, all the layers that we have described currently or historically, has been about 90% domain of the governments, about 10% domain of the private sector. And the next speaker will tell us how. A very good example of that, how that is about to change. So the trend that we predict in our firm is that by 2020, probably most infrastructure investments supporting the air transportation and the aviation industry, we estimate that are going to reach pretty close to 60%. So they, in our opinion, are going to be higher than the actual private investments. Cases in point, for the Americas conference, we are very, very watchful of Colombia, Brazil obviously, but Mexico as well. The infrastructure in airport development, all the activities around it is certainly something to watch. And the important thing for the private investor is to know that this balance of investment power is, in our opinion, and some other analysts, shifting to the private sector. Starting private public ventures, but will shift to the private sector more and more. This slide I prepared for the London conference, I had just come from another meeting, was very focused on the commercial space industry, and because we don't have that much time, I'm going to pass that. I'm going just to address the general issue of navigation, satellites, and how that affects the industry, and I'll let our next speaker speak about it. For the Americas, in North America, from an investment viewpoint, we have a low growth, low yield aviation industry. Now we are narrowed to the air transportation aviation industry. For any investor that is thinking about coming in North America, they are going to be comparing it to any other utility. They're going to be comparing it with telecom, with pharmaceuticals, with food, basically. Is that level of maturity. However, for the rest of the Americas, this is something that should be of interest to investors. From south of Mexico, which is Canada, Mexico, US, NAFTA, to Chile, in my opinion, we are looking at probably the most robustly stable and highest yield with confidence aviation, commercial aviation industry in the world. And I say that because even though statistically it's number 2 after us, Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific has an unknown, and the unknown is China. What is going to happen with China this decade? Whereas in Latin America, more and more the trend is towards stability, free commerce, free trade, and an environment that favors less growth, perhaps less returns, but more stable. The rest is a review of the different regions, and I'll keep it just contained to the Americas focus. And basically our investment picks, if anybody wants to invest in this wonderful industry and wants to talk about Latin America, please let me know. We are bullish on Brazil, and I guess the last change I made is not here, but we are bullish in Brazil, we are bullish in Colombia, in Chile, and this is an interesting one, Central America. From Panama to Guatemala, there is certainly the conditions to have a developing aerospace and aviation industry, as we have seen in Mexico. Inevitably, the wave is coming down, and at some point will merge with Colombia. Investment opportunities for the Americas, Brazil. We have a window between now and 2016, and if you are an investor in the construction business, in the communications business, technology, or services and support, the Brazilian government wants to. They have incentives and programs to invest in public-private or purely private partnerships to develop their infrastructure, airports, communications, access to airport services. Is probably the best opportunity in the short term, 5 years. And other opportunities, emerging commercial space operations. Brazil is looking at the space industry very seriously, so is Colombia. Aerospace energy. Some of you were telling me earlier that from aerospace, they're looking at energy investments. What can we do to advance the biofuels? What can we do to advance the electric cells on engines? What can we do to advance systems on aircraft? We were talking about earlier. Replaceable systems that are simpler, that are easier to maintain and repair. And last but not least, materials. I believe that there's a very, very interesting sector in the composites. And that industry is migrating already to emerging economies, such as Brazil, such as Colombia. The investment in North America that is very, very high yield, extremely focused and extremely interesting, is the exotic materials. Beyond composites, we are talking about ceramics, we are talking about lightweight composites at the apex of the new technology that could get some improvements, major improvements, like Michael was saying, step improvements in the weight of aircraft materials, looking at later at the 2030, 2035 window. That's what Boeing is looking at, that's what Embraer, Bombardier, and Airbus are looking at. And certainly in the Americas, the conditions for those investments and the companies creating those investments exist. Supply chain management, that's a little bit of a high-yielding, a very large sector already, very mature. Optimization of the logistics supply chain, MRO. Providers know very well that now it's not enough to fix, but now you have to predict, you have to manage real-time, provide management service of maintenance. That's an interesting sector as well. And then we move into air traffic control management. Again, having a guest speaking about that, I'm going to move forward. The more traditional airport and buildings investment in infrastructure. Very large investments here in Miami. We've had a $6 billion airport project the last 10 years. And out of those $6 billion, 80 or 90% of that went to private companies that made very interesting returns in the infrastructure investment. Contractors, developers, builders, architects, designers. So those are the infrastructure segments that are interesting and that you would like to watch. And the private sector involvement in the design, funding, and management of all these segments in the industry. And to close about the space conversation, if somebody really wants to get in a leading-edge infrastructure environment, probably the satellite communications, guidance, and navigation is within the aerospace industry, directly affecting how airlines and how aircraft operate. That's extremely attractive in terms of the potential returns on investment. And like I've been announcing, our next speaker will talk about how the FAA is looking at a private-public partnership for the next-gen infrastructure aspect of the navigation industry. So that summarizes a couple of hours in 15 minutes. So if I went too fast or gave too much information, I'd like to send that presentation to you. And if there are a couple of thoughts I'd like to leave you with is, one is multimodal, that is coming, and it's coming very strongly in North America. And the other one is the satellite industry, the space industry, directly sandwiching our aviation, air transportation industry, and becoming the most relevant infrastructure investment aspects in addition to fuels, propellants, and in addition to materials and airframes and engines. Thank you very much.